the information to help them to play with their children. I think through all of that, just seeing the broader impact that has, seeing the research, you quoted some of it. I've worked with Rebecca Winthrop and others at Brookings over the years too. We know what works. So I think being able to then see it applied and to importantly, and I'll talk about this later, to hear the stories of the parents and the children and the impact that had at some of the toughest times in places like Uganda, where schools were shut for 2 full years without any real hope for a long time. So I think seeing that impact, that even in the hardest times, even in the toughest circumstances as well, play doesn't have to be a luxury. And I think we need to remember that it's very low resource. It's very easy to do as well. So for me, it's been a life journey, but really came to life for me during COVID at the Lego Foundation.
Thanks, you. And I'm kind of happy to share a story. I feel like I have stories every day, though, in the communities where we work. It's just the joy and privilege of the work that we get to do at Learn to Play. But a few years ago, we had piloted a program called the Parent Playbox. And it's a very low-cost parenting program where we work with caregivers, mothers or fathers or any caregiver, to be able to bring play and develop a secure attachment through play as the tool. And in a small refugee camp in Botswana, a mother once told us that she said, I used to think that only children play, and my parents never played with me. And so I thought that my role as a parent was to cook, clean, and discipline my child. But when she joined the Parent Playbox kind of sessions, she started practicing blowing bubbles with her child, or drawing, or playing simple games with household materials. And a few months later, when we went and did our feedback, she said something that will always stay with me. She says, now my child can laugh with me. Before, she feared me, right? So now my child can laugh with me. And we used to be strangers in the same room, but now we're family in the truest sense. And I think I will never, ever forget, like, I think I have goosebumps even still thinking about how she said that. But, that single sentence, I think, captures what play does. It really can, it dissolves fear, where she said, my child was afraid of me, but now she laughs. It dissolves fear into connection and attachment. It transforms relationships, not through instruction and discipline and care only, right? But through joy. And it really reminded her, and I think all of us, that play is not something that you do in your free time. It's not just this add-on after the serious work of education or chores or, household stuff. But it's how we actually remember to be human, to be authentic in our relationships, and to hope. And I think particularly in this crisis context in the refugee camp, how particularly powerful play can be in some of those communities.
Shweta and Vishal, do you want to go next?
So I can maybe jump in. So thanks Priyanka for sharing that. I think much like what you were sharing, I think it's a series of moments, right? Especially when you have the privilege of being so immersed in work that's connected to play. As a teacher, like many others, over the last decade or more, I was very quick to realize that play works to help my children learn and be more engaged. But having said that, while I was transacting play or bringing play into my classroom, I remember this one instance in my first year as a teacher, right? And there was this one girl in my class, and she would say during art or engage in pretend play, she would always stack like 6 blocks together, or stack like 6 dolls together, or she would draw like 6 squiggles. And for the first time during play, I realized I'm not teaching. So you have an opportunity to observe or to participate as an equal. And I didn't recognize it as an opportunity then, but it allowed me to have a conversation. And I realized that this 11-year-old child had 6 siblings that she was taking care of who were younger than her. And that unlocked the relationship between me, the adult trying to teach her, and her in a very different way. Similarly, cut to 10, 12 years later, and I'm in a pre-primary classroom last week, and I see 8 children assemble together during free play and reenact a scene from Squid Games, play for play. Now, this is not to alarm anyone, but what I'm trying to bring out here, there's also beautiful moments, right? When parents tell me, oh my God, ma'am, while playing, I didn't realize that she could do this, or I didn't know he knows that. Those aha moments of observing young children often and always emerge when a child is engaged in play and not when we are trying to test the child. So for me, the first time I realized the potential of just letting children play and not creating play but engaging in it was through smaller moments like these. And I think it has potential really changed the way I look at play, right? It gives me an opportunity to get away from that idea of power where this child is a project and I'm trying to teach the child, to viewing play as a space that is the right of children, but also kind of unlocks so much in terms of how I can learn about children when I get to participate in it with them.
Yeah, such beautiful experiences. So I went to a convent school, and at some point, uh, play went away from my life. My teachers told me to sit in class and study. My parents told me enough of play. You need to start studying. So I was spending every waking hour studying to pass an examination. Play came back only when we started Dream a Dream. 1999, we started Dream Dream as a group of volunteers. We went into shelter homes for HIV positive children, cancer affected children, runaway kids, abandoned kids. And we started playing with them on weekends because that's the only thing we thought would be easy and fun to do. Flying kites, celebrating festivals, doing art workshops, dancing. And then very soon we realized there's more to this. So we went and started talking to a few artists and sports people and said, could you run more regular programs for our kids? So one of the earliest programs we started was a field hockey program and a table tennis program and a collage art program run by an artist, a well-known artist then. And I used to go every day to each of these sessions to observe and see what's happening. In the field hockey program, we realized for the first time, children felt a sense of identity. Many, many months later, I asked a bunch of girls why they come to play hockey and why are they so happy about playing hockey. And they said, when they meet kids from mainstream schools, these are girls living in a care home, those kids are always rattling off saying, I know how to do this, I play this, I do that, and we don't have anything. But now I can proudly say that I'm a hockey player. So that sense of identity and pride. For many of the kids who came from deeply violent family backgrounds, we saw how the sports started channelizing a lot of their anger constructively. They had a kid whose only response to any kind of conflict on the field was to pick up a hockey stick and beat another kid. And we had quite a few occasions when that happened. But we had a very sensitive, empathetic coach who said, instead of taking him out of the program, let's do something different. And he started giving him 30 minutes of extra hockey sessions. And the goal was that in those 30 minutes, this kid had to hit as many hockey balls into the goalpost as he can. And what that did to the kid was, one is tired him out, channelized all his anger and violence he had. But it also made him the best hockey player in the team. And the minute he started playing well, he started winning games for the team. He's got the sense of identity and validation. We had a kid who was a slow learner, and the school had given up on him. He joined the table tennis program, and the first 6 months of learning table tennis or ping pong is that you hit the ping pong ball to the wall, just with the bat. This is the action you do for 6 months, just to get used to it. Now, what we didn't realize is that just doing this action every day for 6 months improved his ability to pay attention and concentrate. We started showing in the classroom. So he started listening better. He started understanding what was being taught in the classroom better. He started applying the learning better. He started scoring well. Now, these are not things that we had designed or planned for, but play enabled. Right? So play for us was a discovery. That play is very, very powerful to work with kids, especially kids who grow up in adversity and trauma, and give them a sense of respect, dignity, identity, confidence, love, give them a sense of that there's a different way to learn, there's a different way to apply that learning. And that's how it became a core strategy for us.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I think this idea of learning being so many different things and it coming out in all of these young people's lives was just wonderful to hear as a thread. Um, and and today, what we hear typically in global conversation, especially when we talk about school-going children, from UNESCO to World Bank, national policies, the focus is more on very specific skills. There is talk of learning poverty, there is talk of foundational literacy and numeracy. And play does fit in these documents as well, sometimes as a methodology or a pedagogy, and sometimes even stress relief, finish your homework and then you can go and play and have a good time. Like these are some of the dominant conversations. And it kind of is seen as two separate things. Play is here and learning is here, and not necessarily as something that goes together. So I'm coming back to you, Shweta and Vishal. Like you've worked deeply with systems in India with the aim of preparing children for life, and in early years as well as with adolescents. So in these specific age groups, what has shaped your thinking about the role of play in preparing children for life, and how has this evolved over time? Like, did you always believe there was a linkage? Or has your opinion changed? How has it evolved for you?
Maybe I can jump in. It's a very heavy question, but definitely a lot of thoughts, right? Again, given that I work in early childhood education, play very organically shows up every day and in everyday moments when we think about how children should be learning or engaging. And every adult has that inherent understanding, I think, in theory. However, you've rightly pointed out that there is this wall between our understanding of play and learning and the space. Our definition of the time that we should dedicate to it or the spaces where it should happen are very separate in our minds and in our understanding as a society. So my own role over the last many years, I often find myself to be a negotiator who's convincing governments, convincing teachers, convincing curriculum designers or parents to make room for play. Now, because of that context, in that journey, inadvertently, I find myself sort of putting play in a box, right? Or commoditizing it, much like maybe a lot of our policy documents do. Adapting more palatable forms of it, like activity-based or play-based learning. Now, the tricky thing that I think now, after many years, when I reflect on it, the tricky thing with doing that is we also tend to fall into the trap where we start defining play as a means to an end. This play must lead to this measurable outcome in this finite amount of time. Otherwise, it's not as important. And naturally, what is more easily measurable is often our literacy and numeracy, right? How do I measure talk? How do I measure the amount of movement that a child needs to get? And most importantly, how do I measure joy? Like what Priyanka was sharing, right? Now, when I have a shared moment blowing bubbles, how do I tell you that's important? Because I don't know to measure the learning that comes from it. And therefore, we have often ended up in a space, and we still do, where we timetable the slots that the day of a child should have, and play kind of fits into some of those slots, and learning fits into other slots. But all is not lost. I mean, play is happening. And in recent years, coming back to my understanding of it, I've expanded my definition of my role, that while I continue to negotiate for play, I also see myself as an advocate for play. I have realized that we need to unlock moments of play for adults, and adults need to experience play in order for them to be able to demand for it as a right for their children. So as an organization, I think we have learned to walk two paths in parallel now, where we continue to negotiate for more play time, while we continue to now say we will also create experiences of play for all stakeholders and adults involved, without which we can't expand that understanding of play.
Yeah, I'd love to build on what Shweta shared. One is clearly it's play for play's sake to begin with. Play just brings more joy, love, humanity, empathy, care, creativity, everything into our lives. So why not, right? From our work, there are 2, 3 lenses that have brought in more depth in our understanding of the role of play. One is the understanding of the problem itself. We work with children who come from deeply marginalized backgrounds, adverse childhood experiences. Now, when children experience adversity, which could be lack of food or nutrition, neglect, lack of emotional love and care in the environment, abuse, violence, war, extreme poverty, displacement, any or all of these adverse experiences impacts children's ability to achieve developmental milestones, which means children don't grow age appropriately at the sensitive periods. Now imagine a child who's experienced 3 or 4 adversities and at the age of 4 enters the school environment, which is a room of 4 walls, is expected to sit, listen to a new person, a strange new person who's the teacher who's standing in front and giving out information and knowledge. The child has not built the ability to absorb information, has not built the ability to take in that learning because of the adversity, because they've not achieved development milestones. But our classrooms are designed as one size fits all, linear classrooms. They're homogenized, that every child at the age of 4 is at the same level of learning. Not true. Now, what we realized is the use of play plays a very important role in helping children catch up to developmental milestones. And over years of research, we have seen that children catch up to physical milestones, height and weight. They catch up to mental milestones, ability to understand, comprehend. They also catch up to emotional milestones. And the use of play really helps in doing that, which is why play is important. So if you want children to also do well in learning, then play as a pedagogical approach, as a tool, is critically important. Especially now, when you bring more and more children who are growing up in adversity, coming into a homogeneous school system. The second is, again, from my experience, what we realize is that now, if I go back and ask each one who's attending this call today, that what do you remember of your childhood or experiences? Very few of us will remember our physics or mathematics or geography, but we will remember experiences that we probably had on the playing field, experiences we probably had if we were part of a theater group or an art group, experiences that we had when our teacher took us outside the school environment for learning. It could sometimes even be just a conversation that we had with a teacher, something related to life. Now, why do we remember that? Even now, as I'm asking you this question, some of you are already thinking of those memories. And why are those memories coming back? Because those memories make place in our body. Right? When we say, I have butterflies in my stomach, I'm feeling shivers, or my hair is standing up, it's the body's response to something, right? So our body remembers powerful transformative memories. Could be positive or negative, hopefully more positive. Play gives children deeply transformative, lifelong positive experiences. They might not remember the subject, but years later, they'll remember that there was this teacher who taught me in this way. And that's why I remember this. Or there was this teacher who made me feel this way. That's why I remember it. And in life, when we go through ups and downs, it is those memories and learnings from those memories that help us, give us courage and resilience to deal with life's challenges. So play also creates powerful experiences which stay with us for life. These are two, there are more points, but I'll kind of pause here. Why play is so critical.
That was beautiful. The body remembers positive memories, and play causes more of those memories. That's really staying with me. Thank you for that, Vishal. Um, um, yeah. Um, we'll move to Priyanka and Ewan. So these kinds of shifts that children experience themselves. For play to happen, we need those that convincing power to kind of stay with parents and funders and governments and all of the layers in the system that need to enable play for them to see play as essential. And Priyanka, you spoke at the beginning about a mother who experienced a shift and talked about it, and you've built various play programs and shown that caregivers can also rediscover play as a way of learning. And you've worked in storytelling and strategic communications with Lego and across organizations, so you have that sense of how ideas gain traction. Um, and so if we all recognize as we do the power of play and what it leads to, what would it like when you've been able to convince someone of it, like what has been a story like this? What did it take, and what can organizations like ours or play advocates keep in mind to evangelize this idea more? So Priyanka, I would love to hear from you, and then Ewan.
Sure. I think, yeah, it's an everyday battle. So I'm not going to say that we have like evangelized it fully in Botswana. We're working at it every day. But there are certain wins that we have had, and I think maybe to share some of those and like how we've done that. I think that the first thing that we learned very quickly is not to invite decision makers, and decision makers are parents as well, right? Like the parents are taking the decision to send their children to a play-based program, play group, as well as policymakers and funders, is not just to invite them to see our play group, but inviting them to play. And I think when we include them in our programs, when we sit them in circles, when we get them to blow the bubbles, when we get them to start making artwork from sticks, stones, leaves, and sand, and something shifts in them as adults as well. And then sure, they can take a step back and observe. And I think what in a country like Botswana, where only 15% of children have had access to early childhood education historically, and majority living in poverty, I think we really looked at play as the entry point for learning, for well-being, for policy and dialogue. And so when we started inviting our decision makers into play, I think one district officer told us, oh, I get it now, like I can see the difference in these children. This is not play for the fun. And she said something very official government like, and she said this is play for the future. And we like to use that a lot, that she said that, but it was very, very cool that she kind of acknowledged this is not play for fun, this is play for the future. And I think that story has become a seed that we've used for further advocacy. But also we've started working with local businesses, so like safari lodges, because that's a really big area of kind of income and revenue into Botswana, or supermarkets, and they're contributing things like materials and food, as well as obviously policy to enable play groups. When I first started Learn to Play, the word play group didn't exist in Botswana. We had preschools and daycare centers. And when I said, oh, I want to start play groups, we were told in all our communities we were illegally operating. And now there is legislation for play groups. We can license play groups to be what Learn to Play has kind of developed as the play group model in Botswana. And we've kind of now termed this making play everyone's business. So from the safari lodge to the supermarket, to the parents, to the village chiefs, to everybody involved, how are we making play everyone's business, not just Learn to Play's mandate? And I think, that doesn't come from statistics. It doesn't come from sitting with PowerPoints and reports. It actually really does come from stories, and inviting all of these people to be part of that story. It's not just a story they're listening to, it's a story that they're now telling. And I think that's been our really biggest shift.
Maybe I'll build on that, Bianca. And I love also bridging to Vishal's point around, you remember how you felt even a very long time ago. And I think increasingly in the work that I've done, the storytelling part is key. I think we forget sometimes in different environments that we're all human, and stories are also how humans forever have made sense of the world. I mean, I think that's for as long as there have been humans, there have been stories. I've actually been doing some work. I'm actually in India this week working with an organization, Quest Alliance, that I work with. We've been doing a lot of work on storytelling, and someone came up with a really beautiful thing, which was that every story is a bridge between you and your audience, but the story only works if it starts on their side of the bridge. And so I'd start with that because I think it's a very key thing that many of us in advocacy and influencing and even evangelizing can be problematic, is that we start with us. And we're already converted. So for me, whether it's play, it's learning through play, or it's anything, it's really starting with the audience. It's starting with the who. Who are we trying to persuade here? Who do we want to talk to? And importantly, being really clear what do we want them to think, do, feel differently. And I think those are very key answers to have before we start telling our stories. And in practice, where have I seen that work? I see it, at the micro and the macro, but specifically in this environment. When I started at the Lego Foundation, heading advocacy and communications, probably the best research in learning through play in the world sits within the Lego Foundation. I think both its funded research and the greatest minds, an incredible amount, honestly inaccessible to almost anyone other than those that wrote it, or the academic minds, or those that cared. So the big challenge there for me and my team was, how did we start to take this incredible research and give it to people who could use it? And maybe a couple of tangible examples there, as we really looked, parents and caregivers. Priyanka, you talked a lot. We did incredible research, insights, focus groups to understand parents and caregivers around the world and some of the challenges they had. And then from that, we were able to translate actually what's now learningthroughplay.com, which had been the Lego Foundation's main website. We scrapped the corporate website while I was there. And what we did instead was take the research, but build on top of it really easy to use play activities for parents everywhere. And what that enabled was I could go in and I could search and say, I've got a 2-year-old, what can I do? Making it really simple. If you then wanted to go beyond that, you could click through and you could find the research that backed it up. So it gave choices around this, but it made it really easy. And similarly, I've taken some of that work as to how do we take that out in the world. I've worked with Santander Foundation in Portugal to design a summer holiday campaign for the parents and their workforce, making it, again, super simple. Here's what play does, here's the theory, but we're going to WhatsApp you a play activity for your age-appropriate children every day. You don't need resources, you don't need toys. How do you make it easy? And my point of this is really to say that's about meeting, that's starting the bridge on their side. It's saying, what do they need? When I take that to the macro level, I mean, I think we all know, but it's worth remembering that the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child enshrines play as a right of all children. It shouldn't be a right, it is a right. So we start from that point. It's not necessarily realized in a lot of conditions. The other thing I was very, very involved in back in a few years ago was starting the original campaign to try and get an International Day of Play recognized by the UN, and working with the Lego Group and a few others in what was the Real Play Coalition. We purposefully built a campaign that was as inclusive as possible, that was not as prescriptive as many wanted it to be. Obviously, to get a day of play, the first thing you need to do is win member states, and that means winning governments who will then sponsor something to take to the UN. So we built a multi-layered campaign around how did we pick off the governments we need, who were the ones that we already worked with, but also how did we build a huge coalition of organizations globally that were able to campaign and influence their own governments. But really importantly, it was never about the day. The campaign didn't end when the day was given. It was a huge moment, but the whole point of that was to use it as a hook for anybody. I'm now living back in the UK after 12 years away, and I've been amazed to see the fantastic work that's going on. There's been a play commission in England. There's a all-party group on play in Parliament. There's Play England is revitalized. There's huge amounts of work now going on that is kind of grassroots driven, and is given the politicians that care the space as well to be able to then come out and do this. And people are challenging now, crazy ideas. I'll give an example. Many schools in the UK, particularly in urban areas, they have playgrounds. There's not a lot of play space left, but there'll be a playground. They close for the holidays, and many schools turn those playgrounds into car parks because they can charge for cars, and it's a money-making scheme for them. The reason I'm laughing is almost because it's so ridiculous when I say it out loud. These are often the only play spaces that exist in inner city urban communities, yet the second school's out, they're closed. But again, seeing coming together of different communities, people who don't come at it from a play point of view, but are coming at it from a safe streets or a clean streets perspective, starting to build coalitions. And the point I say of that is because the stories that we've been able to collectively tell speak to all of them. They place play as a very relevant solution or answer or part of what they individually may care about. So I think the more maybe we move, evangelizing is important, but I think at the same time, figuring out how actually do we take an audience first approach? How do we position play with everybody and every community in a way that's hyper relevant for them?
Thanks for sharing that, Priyanka and Ewan. And we've at TOF as well, we've used a lot of the Lego Foundation resources in designing some of our play spaces. And there's a lovely set of characteristics of play, and then we've used that to ensure that kids are able to make their own choices of play. And we're also looking at leading some research and finding out how much do kids get to play now. And hopefully we'll get to release some of that soon. We have about 10 minutes to go, so let's hear a closing round of reflections from each of you. We'll start from Priyanka, and would love to know one practice or principle that your organization keeps in mind to capture the magic of play and keep it alive.
Sure. I think first I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been speaking. I feel like I've learned so much, and I'm really grateful that you're recording this as well, because I want to go back and take a lot of notes from what each of you have, like my fellow speakers have shared and said. So thank you. I think just in terms of a closing reflection, over the last couple of years at Learn to Play, what we've seen is, and I think maybe COVID exacerbated it, or some of our work in poverty and trauma situations, is the mental health side of play. And I think, we were talking about learning and how do we measure joy and connection and attachment. And it's something that we're still grappling with. But as a closing reflection, I think my thing about stories with play is how do we make the invisible visible? And even though we can't quantify those moments, by sharing these moments, by sharing these stories, we're actually starting to take those invisible moments, something that's very abstract, and making it a little bit more concrete and tangible. And I would really want to kind of, and I think that's what's influencing policy and decision making, and that you're starting to see that Indigenous games, cultural wisdom, a lot of the chat, I've been reading some of the comments we've all been talking about our childhoods of freedom, of playing outside, of trust, of, why we don't have that anymore. And I think it's maybe how are we bringing that back through these stories and telling these stories a lot more. So I kind of imagine this future where one of our, we call the mamas that we work with, the women that we train to become educated, they're called matla mamas. Matla in our local language means strength or strong. So they're the strong mothers of the community. I kind of imagine the matla mama sitting alongside national education data, which we do need, but where joy, belonging, well-being, connection through play are seen as essential indicators of learning that the statistics, Botswana and UNICEF and so on are kind of, leading with. Because I think when we champion play through story, we move from all these statistics into human connection and well, humanity really. And so I think, one parent even told us that when they play these games with their children, they're not just activities, they're the answers to questions that they didn't even know that they had. And I think it's sharing that more and more that actually reveals the power of play, and reminds us what it really means. And so I think my closing thing is, how can we do this more? So thank you, OpenTree, also for facilitating a story-based session.
Would love to hear from you, Shweta, and then Vishal, and then Ewan.
Sure. I think I completely echo Priyanka that we need more stories, because stories are the evidence that we are probably missing in all of the data that we have around play and play-based learning. So thank you for Priyanka for reiterating that. Since you asked for a specific, what is that one thing? I kept wondering what percolates into all of our work, right? And as an extension of what I shared earlier, Playful adults want play for children. So what we try to do at KEF, one is be a little playful ourselves. As social change organizations, we tend to get bogged down by the problem, but a sense of playfulness and lightheartedness in our everyday practice is essential for us to be able to talk about play very authentically. So that's one reminder. And I think taking that practice further, what we try to do is seed play into existing structures when we work with schools. So one of our most recent adventures, and I call it an adventure because it's been absolutely fun, is playful PTMs, right? So parent-teacher meetings or PTMs that many of us in all countries have, we have reimagined it to now be a space where parents come to school and engage in play, creating something with their kids, dancing, singing. And the culture of the parent-teacher meeting has moved from being one of seriousness and judgment to a playful, lighthearted space. We don't know what that is unlocking, but really the question I want to leave everyone with, and something that we reflect on very, very regularly now, is what can we do to percolate play and playfulness into everyday spaces and interactions, because it's relevant to everybody. I completely echo what Priyanka was saying, that play is everybody's problem and everybody's joy to share as well. So that's really what we try to do now, and something we want to keep practicing.
In our case, it's more entrenched as a creative practice. So within the culture of the organization, there's a lot of inner work that we do on our own life skills, on our own shadows, on our own identities, and we use play and art to do that. That's the only way we know how learning happens, how transformation happens. Even conflict resolution in the organization happens through playful processes. So we know that works for us, and that works for the young people, that works for the teachers, that works for the bureaucracy and policymakers too. So it's deeply entrenched as a system, as a process. Then also we have something called a people philosophy, where a set of big ideas around play are deeply entrenched as a practice for every individual who works in the organization. Every individual is encouraged to have a personal creative practice. So for me, for example, it's writing poetry. For someone else, it might be art. For someone else, it might be dance. Because we believe that's how you continue to keep the playfulness alive in us. And every design that we have, whether it's for young people, teachers, school leaders, policymakers, including the way we host our annual gathering, change the script, the design is using play as a pedagogical approach for transformation to happen. So for us, it's a very integral part of the culture and strategy of the organization.
It's hard to build on all those points. I think a few things that maybe pull it together. I don't know, many of you may have seen Jonathan Haidt's work, but he wrote in the Atlantic recently around some research that's been done, albeit in the US context, that asked children a lot around this. And I think, if I remember off the top of my head, 45% of children asked what they'd like to do, said they'd like to play outside with friends. Only 25% said they wanted to go online. Yet of that same cohort, something like 75% of them were playing Roblox online on a regular basis. Now, some numbers there, but let's unpack that for a minute. Roblox is arguably one of the most unsafe places children can be. A lot of the evidence tells us what's hanging out there. And yet people and parents, all of us included, feel that it's safer and easier to tell our kids to go online rather than to go outside. And I loved that piece that he brought out there, as it's time as parents and caregivers that we replaced go online with go and play outside, because that's what's missing. And even a generation that doesn't know what it's missing is craving it and is showing up in the evidence. And when asked that they want to play, they crave human interactions. They want to learn and play and argue and get dirty outside. And I think if there's one thing we could take away from it, we know all the evidence, we have all the figures, but we have to allow our children to play again. And that's not just in the systems or in the schools or in formal places. It's something all of us as parents and caregivers can do as well. So we know the evidence. Let's add some emotion, but also let's let them go play out.
Sorry, I think somebody needs to go on mute. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ewan, for sharing as well. It's been a short conversation, but it's really left me with a lot of food for thought, and I'm just so grateful that each of you shared so authentically. Just lots of little moments that I'm taking back with me. And all your personal stories and the stories from your work have really added a lot of value. We shared many stories today, and we exactly a month from now we want to share even more stories. On your screen, you'll see the Play Summit that's coming up on December 13th, and our theme for the summit is Finding Play. So if you enjoyed this conversation today, then please do join us there, because there'll be many more conversations on finding play and rediscovering play. The link to sign up for the summit is also in the chat. So hope to see many more of you there. And yeah, thank you for this lovely evening. Thank you, Vishal, Shweta, Priyanka, Ewan, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Rich
thanks,
conversation.
Lakshmi. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.